The Deku Tree dungeon is truly a masterclass in game and dungeon design, with one incredibly baffling exception. Welcome, my name is Verthandy, and in this video series I will do an in-depth analysis of the dungeons of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. And when I say in-depth, I mean it. I will go room by room, analyzing every aspect of each and try to figure out what makes them so special, all in a quest to make my own game. In this video, I will study the dungeon that was the very first 3D Zelda dungeon, the one that started it all, the Deku Tree. I believe some context is necessary for this analysis. The Deku Tree's dungeon is a very interesting case study when it comes to the dungeon design. The circumstances around its design are very unique. What do I mean by this? Well, at the time of release of Ocarina of Time, 3D graphics and movement were just being explored. Ocarina of Time was the very first 3D Zelda. It needed not only to live up to the previous Zelda titles, but also successfully introduce players to a completely new 3D space. The Deku Tree in particular, being the opening dungeon, had to fulfill several roles other dungeons didn't have to worry about. You see, because it was the opening dungeon, it had to 1. Lay the groundwork for how dungeons would work going forward in the game. 2. Emphasize and make use of this new 3D space. 3. Be a bridge for returning Zelda players into the 3D space while also welcoming new players. 4. It needed to be memorable. After all, you are the opening act. All this is something other dungeons would not really need to worry about. Before we start, let's set some rules and context. We will approach the Deku Tree assuming the player is a noob, a completely new player. We will assume the player is doing a blind playthrough at the time of release of the game. That is, no previous experience with other Zelda games or 3D games, and there is no guides or walkthroughs available if we get stuck. The game has to do all the heavy lifting and teach the player everything from the controls to where to go and what to do. This dungeon has to do everything. Okay, so I might have exaggerated a little bit there. You see, a lot of the heavy weightlifting for introducing and teaching the player about the new 3D space is actually done by the Deku Forest. Here the player is tasked to find a sword and shield. While doing said task, the player will engage with most of the different non-combat mechanics and familiarize themselves with the controls. The Deku Forest might deserve its own video. After all, when I first played this game, being let loose in the Deku Forest felt like being let loose at a playground as a child. After completing this task and getting past Miro, the player goes through this small hallway where chances are they are going to accidentally walk into a Deku Baba and experience their first bit of combat, and probably their first small panic attack, as they will struggle to wrestle the camera to do what they want, and they might completely fail to use the game's targeted system.
Link's little noises are amazing. No! What the? We've been attacked, and we've lost our first... We've taken our first damage.
What was the stick for? Oh, shoot. Stick him up. Stick him up.
Okay, wait. Let me... Oh. Okay. We're just gonna leave.
I don't know why Nintendo thought it was a good idea to place those Deku Baba there, so don't ask me. We are not going to be doing an analysis of anything outside of the dungeons. A short while later, we will arrive at the Deku Tree and trigger a cutscene. Afterwards, we gain access to the Deku Tree's dungeon. Okay, now for the dungeon. Upon entering the dungeon, we are given a cinematic shot of the main room. Notice how it starts with the camera facing the ceiling, then it pans to show the player, giving a clear view of the verticality of the main room and emphasizing the 3D space. Also, at the end of the cutscene, we end with the ladder not only in view, but clearly implying the player where to go first. I will be treating this main room as 3 separate rooms, just as the dungeon map. Inside the first room, you can immediately see 3 Deku Baba. All 3 are positioned in such a way they don't block the access to the next floor. I would like to point out the Deku Babas are also rotating in place, that is, you can easily retreat without worrying about being chased. This is going to be a recurring theme that we'll see throughout this dungeon. In the same room, there are 3 bits of grass you can cut to get hearts and other drops. I don't know how many of you actually noticed this, but this grass respawns after a few seconds. Personally, I never noticed this until my 4th or 5th playthrough. When you put this all together, the Deku Baba, an enemy rotate in place, the player being able to easily retreat, and infinitely respawning grass to get health back, it becomes obvious this room is meant to function as combat training. You are being invited to practice and familiarize yourself with the combat. When you approach the web at the center of the room, now we will bring to your attention there is a floor below. This is one of the many instances where the developers guide you in the direction of progress. Also, this is the most heavy-handed one, in my opinion. After killing the Deku Baba, or completely ignoring them, the player climbs onto the single floor. Moving on to the next floor of the main room, here they introduce a little bit of low-stakes platforming. Also, the respawning grass is also present in this floor, right by the most likely source of damage, the Walls Kultula. There are 3 of them blocking the way to the 3rd floor. While veteran players might be able to bypass them to get early to the 3rd floor, we are assuming the current player is a noob, so we will assume the player won't do it. Right below them, we find a chest. Obviously, the player is going to rush to open it. Here we obtain the dungeon map. Think about this. We are in the main room, literally a stone throw away from the entrance. There is a good chance the player's only actions so far are literally climbing the ladder and opening the chest. The dungeon map is given to the player so early in this dungeon is actually surprising. Here the devs are making sure you know where you are and have no chance of getting lost. From here, there is only one way to go. The door at the end of this floor. Before we proceed, I want to bring to your attention something. Have you noticed the recovery heart floating just past the end of that platform, near the center of the room? If the players like me and didn't notice the grass response on the first playthrough, chances are they will try to grab the heart. The heart is positioned in such a way you have to do a running jump to get it. Doing so will also make you land on the spider web on the floor below. Smart players will realize they maybe can break the web by falling onto it and attempt to jump again, only to realize they must jump from higher up to succeed. Or, if you are like me, you will see the way the web stretch and bounce back and think, oh, trampoline, and fall around jumping over and over on it until you get bored. Yes, I'm easily amused. Anyways, next, moving through the door, we face our first true challenge. In this room, we will encounter our first forced combat encounter. As a noob, chances are if you suddenly are thrown into combat and shot at, your first gut reaction will be to block, which will immediately earn you a victory here. Honestly, this is not much of a combat encounter. Likely it will end before you know what happened. On the off chance you reacted differently, once you get close to the Deku Scrub, it will hide, giving you plenty of room to calm down and prepare. Upon defeating the enemy, it will drop a recovery heart. Notice that this is not any recovery heart. This one is like the one that was floating over the web in the previous room. It will not despawn, allowing your player to grab it without issues or fears of missing it. Next, in this room we are faced with a suspicious looking platform and a chest on the other side of the room. Our only option here is to jump onto the platform that would suddenly shake and collapse. If you are quick enough, you can jump towards the chest, otherwise you will fall safely in the pit below. Just in case, once more we find respawning grass here too. On the chest we find the dungeon item, the slingshot. Turning around to leave, you will realize you cannot reach the door without knocking down the ladder that is conveniently placed just above it, forcing us to make use of the dungeon item, the slingshot, to hit it. As small and simple it might be, let's call this our first puzzle. As a side note, there is this climbable wall on the side of this room. At the top, there is a chest containing a recovery heart. I must say, when I replaced this dungeon to make this video, I had no memory of this being here. I never actually noticed this right here. What is this? Oh, there is another... Wait, was this here on the original game? I don't remember this. It seems like I might have blacked out all the chests containing extremely minor optional stuff like this. Still, it's nice the devs place small rewards, if you can call it that, throughout the dungeon to reward exploration. Okay, after obtaining the dungeon item, we need to backtrack to the entrance. On the previous room, we can see the Deku Scrub doesn't respawn. Back in the entrance, having conquered the first and second floors, our only path forward is either climbing up to the next floor or through the web at the center of the room. Our path going up is blocked by a skull wall tula. This is a continuation of the tutorial on how to use the link shot, which is target being slightly higher than the last. Since we are assuming the player is a noob, that makes this our second mandatory combat encounter, even if it's very one-sided. Once on the third floor, we can see at each jumping down spot, there is a big skulltula. This enemy, just like every other enemy we can encounter, is rotting in place and cannot chase or attack us unless we approach it first. The only path forward now is the door on the same level. This next room is a puzzle. The first thing you will likely to notice is the music telling you are near an enemy. Then the switch to your right. Activating the switch will trigger the 3 platforms in the room to rise and a timer to start ticking down. This is a very basic jumping puzzle with next to no stakes, as the height is not enough for you to take damage if you happen to fall, and the enemy by the climbable wall to go back to the switch can be ignored if you are careful enough, or you can kill it and it will not respawn. On the other side of the platform challenge, you will find a chest with the compass. Next to the chest, we find a respawning Deku Baba. That is one specifically set up in a way to facilitate you getting Deku sticks. Off to the side on an optional path through the jumping puzzle, there is a Skulltula guarding another chest and a gold Skulltula. This optional path is set in such a way it encourages you to clear the path first before trying to reach the chest. When trying to exit the room, you will notice the door is locked. Navi will give you a hint on what to do if you approach the torch off to the side. Here you can see another example of intelligent game design. Remember that respawning Deku Baba by the compass chest? If you somehow don't have Deku sticks or you run out of them trying to solve this puzzle, you will be required to do the jumping puzzle again to get another Deku stick. They could have placed the enemy closer by to the torch. However, they decided to place it next to the compass chest to coerce the player into doing the platforming again, likely to have the player become more familiar with the controls and platforming. For the next part of the dungeon, if you have been paying attention, the devs have been encouraging the player to climb higher and higher to proceed. They have guided us to the third floor, and now there are no more doors for us to explore. Here, you are for the first time required to kill a Skulltula, and whether it's for fun or because you realized what you need to do next, given the subtle hints of the devs, the player is likely to do one thing. Jump. Welcome to B1. We are now on the ground. We have landed in water. Looking around, you will notice this room is very particular. There are two gold Skulltulas in the walls. We have water dividing 3 platforms. One has a non-respawning enemy and 2 respawning grasses. Also, we can see a door behind the cobweb. The second one has a switch. Behind a cobweb, there is a very noticeable gold torch and a small chest. The last one is the biggest of them all, taking half the room. Also, obviously too high to reach. You're also likely to notice the area where the water is shallow, allowing you to walk on it. The 2 gold Skulltula can be obtained with a bit of sniping and clever jumping. The enemy is easy to dispatch. What's left is the switch. Activating will show us the torch lighting up and in the process burning off the cobweb, letting the player know the cobwebs can be burned. The chest has only a recovery heart, and with the information we just got, we light the Deku stick and make use of the shallow waters to reach the other platform and burn the cobweb as we were shown, opening the path to the next room. What's more, we encounter combat. This one, much like the first mandatory combat, can be solved just by a quick target lock and block. We are rewarded with a recovery heart and information by the defeated Deku Scrub. However, this does not unlock the next room. On closer inspection, we can see there is a respawning glass and an eye over the door. Shooting the eye will allow us to move forward. As a side note, it is a little trivia about this particular fight. The hint for defeating this Deku Scrub is actually a pun that has been mistranslated. Take note about the height difference between the Deku Scrub and yourself. When he says 23 is number 1, it's actually a little play on words that originally was, in Japanese, Nissan Ichiban, which properly translated, it would be older brother is the best. Basically, the Deku Scrub is calling you, as some Japanese children do, a perceived elder child, older brother, and saying, older brother, you are the best, with this little pun, for having mercy and letting him go. Next, the room starts with Navi, immediately directing you to dive underwater. Looking into the water, we can see a switch Pressing it will lower the water level and start a timer. The low water lets you ride across the pond to the other side without being hit by the rotating spiky thingy. If you pay attention, you will notice the timer is generous enough. One could maybe make the trip across 3 times before the timer runs out. Here again, we had some mandatory combat, followed by a simple push-a-block puzzle. This is our introduction to pushing blocks. Off to the side, we can see once more the respawning grass, just in case the player has trouble with the Skulltula. In this room, for the first time, we see a puzzle that becomes easier if we deal with the enemies first. This particular room is more puzzle than combat heavy. On our left, we have a Deku Baba set up for us to get Deku sticks. In the center, one more as an obstruction to solving the puzzle. By the door leading to the next room, we have respawning grass. The puzzle itself is a slightly more complex version of the one where you need to light up the torch, making you struggle against the camera and the controls. In the next room, for the first time, we don't have any easy access to respawning grass. Instead, we have a Skulltula by default showing their weak point, making this an easy encounter, even though the difficulty is clearly escalating. On the ceiling we have Goma Larva ready to drop once we approach the center room. These are the first enemies in the dungeon, who are not really rooted in place and will actively seek the player to attack. The larva behavior is very particular. They first approach the player, next they will try to attack with a body slam, then they will run away and repeat. 2 strikes are enough to defeat them, so they are very easy to deal with if you don't panic. I believe this encounter right here is this dungeon's version of a mini-boss. Once the larvae are dealt with, we can open our path by burning a web using a permanent torch in the room and a deco stick. Here, we also come across the one thing I don't understand about this dungeon. So far, this dungeon has been nothing but perfectly crafted, welcoming new players while introducing 3D. There is no fluff. Each and every room has been designed to introduce the player to something. The Deku Tree is a giant tutorial designed to be as detailed and unintrusive as possible. And yet, we have this wall. For those who are unfamiliar with it, this is a bombable wall. You need bombs to go through it. It will not be much of an issue, except for the fact the player will not get bombs until the last half of the second dungeon. Currently, the player doesn't even know what a bombable wall looks like. Hell, they don't even know there are bombs in the game. A new player will only see a dead end with a weird looking wall and think nothing of it. No new player is going to take note of this wall. They will not remember it or think to go back with bombs to go through it. Even the location of the wall is a bit disconcerting. We are probably in one of the deepest rooms inside the dungeon. Chances are players will think coming back here will be not worth it. I personally never even noticed this wall until my 4th or 5th playthrough of the game. And when I finally noticed, it was extremely confusing. I do have a theory for the existence of this wall. So if you watched this far, please tell me what you think about the reason for this wall being here. Is it left over from when this dungeon was in development? Was the Deku Tree maybe not originally meant to be the first dungeon and you visited another dungeon to get bombs first? What do you make of this? Was this intentional and why? Here is my theory. Hello, this is Mew from the future. So I tried to put my theory to the test. When I asked this question, I didn't realize how deep and nonsensical the rabbit hole I just found was. I was so naive. If you want to know what my theory was and the horrors I found putting it to the test, check out my new series I call The Legend of Zelda, The Pointless Quest. Coming soon! I would like to apologize to all the game designers who check it out for the pain I'm going to inflict upon you. Actually, no, I'm not sorry. If I had to suffer through those horrors, I'm going to make sure you also suffer with me. Anyways, let's continue. If you have a better explanation for the existence of this wall, please leave it in the comments. And if you like more of me complaining about random walls on 20 plus year old video games, subscribe! Anyways, we crawl out through this hall and get to the next room. Finally, once more, we find ourselves in the first room we dropped in. We basically did a loop through the rooms. Here we have one last puzzle to solve before we head to the last floor. Pushing this block both enables you to access the torch below and creates a shortcut allowing you to bypass the loop we just went through. The little music jingle tells us we did the correct thing. If you look around, you will notice the torches in the same platform and the enemies. For the torches, you will notice they are placed on these pedestal looking thingies, which makes it so their flames are too high for us to use. As for the enemies, you are not really required to engage with them here. You can just ignore them and complete the puzzle, just like I do here. On to the next floor. This is the last room in the dungeon. Here we also see the respawning grass and a few hearts on the water. Earlier in the dungeon, one of the Deku scrubs actually tells you how to complete this room. This particular challenge is equal parts combat and puzzle, in my opinion. You are required to remember and pay attention to the hints you obtained before and act on them. The boss opens with a cutscene. You are forced to make eye contact with the boss. I always found that very immersive. The mechanics for this boss are very basic. You can only harm the boss when it's stunned. After being harmed, it will climb onto the ceiling and drop eggs, from which the Gomalarma will spawn if you are not quick enough to destroy them. Then Gomag will drop from the ceiling and try to attack. After this attack, Gomag will have a particularly long vulnerable moment, giving you a good chance to stun the boss. The only issue I have with this fight is that at no point the player is told or given a hint that the boss can only be stunned when its eye turns red. This mechanic has never been introduced or hinted at, and I have seen a few new players struggle to stun the boss and do damage because of it. Aside from that, this is an exemplar tutorial boss, one of the best design I have seen in pretty much all video games. The cutscenes for the bosses dying are something I really appreciate, as they cap the dungeon quite nicely. I wonder how many games actually do this. I believe I have seen it in some games, but I find it odd that the biggest developers nowadays don't really bother to do this at all. Now that we have gone through the dungeon, room by room, let us analyze the puzzles as a whole. Each puzzle in this dungeon has been designed with a purpose. Let's go over them. Our first big puzzle we encounter is the one with the web at the center of the room as we enter the dungeon. This one is something I like to call the open question. That is, the moment you enter the dungeon, you are faced with something that makes you ask a question. What is this cobweb? Wait, what is that giant skull? Is that an elevator? Right? This is an open question that often either leads to a more difficult second part of the dungeon or directly to the boss. We start by climbing, then we do a bit of platforming. This leads us to the map and our first required combat. After that, we do more platforming and more climbing. Do you see a recurring theme yet? Next, we are required to kill the Skulltulas, followed by climbing. The next room is not different. We get a time jumping puzzle. If we fail, we need to climb. All this builds up to our leap of faith into the web. Throughout this first half of the dungeon, there is this recurring theme of jumping and climbing ever upwards. The dungeon gently guides us to the top, encouraging us to do the final jump by placing the recovery hearts and the positioning of the planks. Our next puzzle is our first version of the switch with a timer. When we press this switch, the platforms rise and you can use it to reach the chest on the other side of the room. At the same time, we have a torch that is light up and one that is off. Using these two, we unlock the ability to be able to leave the room. Notice the proximity between the switch and the light up torch. On the next puzzle, that is on the first room of Big One, we find basically the same configuration. But this time we notice that when we press the switch, the torch lights up. This is how the developers slowly make more complex puzzles by introducing each piece individually and then slowly combining them into more complex puzzles. While we connected the switch to the torch, there is a big difference on the second part of the puzzle. Now the distance we must carry the torch has increased from on the same platform a few meters away to all the way across the room. This also includes a new obstacle. While it is still platforming, you need to keep track of the shallow waters for you to be able to cross to the other side without putting off the torch. The next puzzle is basically the same puzzle we saw on the room with the dungeon item, but this time we introduce a new element, the eye switch. This, however, we will not be seeing again during this dungeon, but the concept has been introduced. In the next room, we see what I call the second version of the timer switch, this time with a far more complex setup. Here they introduce the diving mechanic. You need to dive to trigger the switch, which starts a timer. Then you need to do some platforming to get across. This has a little bit higher stakes because of the damage the rotating thing can actually do to the player. The timer here is very generous. I believe if timed correctly, you could allow the player to cross 3 times easily. On the other side of the room, we find our introduction to the pushing block. This is a very simple puzzle made only to showcase that the blocks of this kind can be pushed. The next puzzle is a slightly more complex use of the torches. Now we are required to light up 2. This will force the new player to fight the camera controls a little bit to complete it. In the next room, we mainly have a combat challenge. As a side note, did you notice this is the only Skulltula you can kill with the slingshot. We still have the same theme of the lighting the torch to burn the cobwebs. You might notice that so far we have been using a lot of burning cobwebs. This is to build up to the last action in the next room, where we need to burn the cobweb on the floor. But the torches we see here are too high to use. We have a block here. If we push it, a jingle will tell us that what we did is correct. The block grants us access to the torch we use after coming to this floor. Here we need to carry the flame over from the torch below. This involves the block and some platforming. This room is very interesting. I believe this room was originally two separate rooms. My theory is that the upper platform and the lower part originally were separate and each had a self-contained puzzle. The outer reach torches might have been originally meant to be used for the cobweb in the platform, where we could have pushed the block closer to them in order to light the Deku stick. I believe during the process of creation of the dungeon, the devs create a series of rooms, each involving certain mechanics they want the player to learn and interact with. Eventually they grab the start and end rooms and connect them into each other, creating a loop. Once connected, they adjust the new room to make the puzzles chain off each other, such as instead of having to use the block to reach the torches up high, we use it to create a shortcut to bypass the loop and make use of the elements present in the starting room. This would mean the torches we see here in the upper part of the platform are a leftover of the original puzzle. I don't really know if having these torches here is a good idea or not. I can see the players being momentarily confused on how to reach them and turn to the torch below, or at worst, they will get stuck trying to figure out a way to get to them and maybe accidentally jump off the platform without pushing the block to create a shortcut, not realizing the solution is to use the block to reach the one below, resulting in them having to do the whole loop once again. What do you think about the design of this room? Comment below. Our last puzzle is basically a quiz. Did you pay attention to the dialogue and hints we gave you during the dungeon, or did you skip it all? Then again, it is possible to just brute force this one puzzle / combat the counter. You even have the responding grass here to make things easier for you. Now to the combat analysis. As I highlighted during the room walkthrough, all enemies in this dungeon are rooted in place. Whether it's the Deku Babas or the Skulltula, each and every enemy is unable to chase you around. Each combat encounter has responding grass in the room with few exceptions. Funny enough, more than half of the enemy types in this dungeon can be encountered literally on the first room, the entrance. All but the ones I consider the mini-boss, that is the Goma larva and Goma herself, can be encountered on the first two rooms, meaning no new enemies are introduced throughout the entire dungeon at all. Instead, this dungeon focuses on getting the player more familiar with the controls and learning to explore what at the time was cutting-edge 3D graphics and navigation. If we speak exclusively on the command encounters, ignoring the rooms the enemies are in and their distribution, a very telling theme comes to the forefront, striking the enemy's weakness. The Deku Baba, the most common enemy in the dungeon, is a very beginner-friendly enemy, as it is rooted in place, allowing for a 1v1 duel to ease the player into combat. And while it can be simply fought normally, it can be one-shotted by striking at its neck at the right time, or with the use of Deku Nuts. The Skulltula is the second most common enemy in the dungeon, also is rooted in place. Unlike the Deku Baba, it cannot be forced to expose its weakness, requiring the player to be patient and wait for it to show it itself. Also, it's not possible, for the most part, with one exception, to kill it using the link shot from a distance, forcing the player to use the sword. The next enemy the skull wall Tula. While not really rooted in place, it will not chase the player. It serves more as a soft lock, preventing the player from reaching the top of the tree too early and require the player to make use of the link shot, an item that one-shots them. The next enemy, the Deku Scrub, once more a rooted enemy, though this is the only enemy in the dungeon with a range attack. It serves as more of a challenge and as a tutorial to combine the shield with the target lock to direct projectiles to enemies. It will take cover on the ground if the player approaches it to strike using the sword, requiring the player to make use of the shield to defeat it. While it might seem a bit out of place in this lineup, you must keep in mind the player is not really required to make use of the shield with any of the other enemies. The Deku Scrub is here to make sure the player is aware of their shield and make use of it. Did you notice? One for 1v1 duels, aka combat practice, one enemy that requires you to use a sword, one enemy that requires you to use the shield, one enemy that requires you to use the link shot. Every enemy has a reason to be here. The Goma Larva mini-boss exists to test the player's combat skills, as they are the only enemies besides the dungeon boss who can actually chase and fight the player, and not in a 1v1 but on a 1v3. Also notice how the devs place the eggs out of reach so the player cannot prevent them from spawning with a quick strike. Even if somehow the player noticed the eggs in the ceiling, you cannot actually destroy them with a well-placed shot, even though you can actually destroy them with a slingshot during the boss fight. Now, let's talk about something interesting I noticed while analyzing this dungeon. That is the relationship between puzzle and combat. If we ignore the optional enemies, such as the ones that are there just for the player to practice, and we focus only on enemies the player must fight to complete the dungeon, and then we see the distribution of those in comparison to the puzzles, a very curious pattern emerges. Our first mandated encounter is this Deku Scrub. Then we are faced with a puzzle to exit the room of the dungeon item. Next, we are forced to shoot down the wall Skulltula, followed by a puzzle room. After that, we have to kill at least one Skulltula to jump down. Here we have another puzzle, followed by a Deku Scrub, that is followed by another puzzle room. Do you see what the devs are doing here? Next, we have a mixed room, combat and puzzle, then the mini-boss, followed by a puzzle, then combat and puzzle, and finally the boss. The developers are purposely alternated between combat and puzzles every room, eventually ramping up to mixing them and ending with the boss. I believe this was done to manage the pacing within the dungeon, but it's still a very interesting and useful pattern to have in mind. This dungeon was made with the goal of emphasizing verticality, as it was the gateway for 3D for new players, as an introduction to the game as well as the hook of the game. Thus, each enemy is here for a reason. The first half contains no fluff, making each branching set of rooms no longer than 2 rooms deep, guiding the player to the top of the tree for a leap of faith, once more emphasizing the 3D. For the second half, the devs constructed a series of rooms with the puzzles slowly escalating in complexity and gently testing the player's skills in combat. The start and end room were merged together, creating a loop, increasing the sense of exploring an interconnected space. The devs also paced the dungeon, switching back and forward between combat and puzzle, with small optional challenges dotted along the way. I'm honestly quite impressed with how this dungeon was designed. Every element serves a purpose. Each room is either an escalation or has a goal to achieve, which makes that one bombable wall even more questionable. and baffling. What is your opinion on this dungeon? Next, I shall be doing analysis on the second dungeon of the game, Dodongo's Cavern. So if you are interested, please subscribe. Bye bye!